Welcome to Cage Minds Uncensored. I'm Micah Frankel. Shout out to Mac 10, Edwin Ruiz, the I Got Your Back anti-bullying campaign. That's MMACK10. Check them out on Facebook. Hats, beanies, t-shirts, trunks, all sorts of apparel for boxing, MMA. Check out Mac 10. PFL, Glory Kickboxing, Legacy Fighting Alliance, Invicta FC, UFC in Germany, King of the Cage, Force of One Fighting Championships. A lot to talk about today. Let's start it off with, you can't have a PFL event without some kind of controversial topic, it seems like. Not due to their fault. Things happen. Shockingly, one of the best refs in the game has a moment. We all have a moment. You have Steven Seiler landing a beautiful right hand on Alexandre Almeida. Almeida scrambling. Seiler jumps on the guillotine choke. It looks like maybe Almeida goes out. He falls to his hip. You've seen guys fall their side, they're out. Murgliata jumps in. Almeida had just lost balance. Was not out. But it's hard to contest something in this points-driven competition. The points have been assigned. And Steven Seiler becomes the number one seed in what will be the championship tournament. Almeida, I believe, had a victory. Yeah, he had a victory heading into this week's competition. So he's already assured of that next round. Really strange that the two guys that had first round finishes the previous week faced off there with Almeida and Seiler. Seiler, two big first round finishes. Some guys not as in to the points driven system as other guys. Andre Harrison, Timur Valiev, they're both going to move on. They're both going to be in the championship tournament. They both played their games, didn't get that over-aggressiveness, both got decision victories. You have two fights, they both won them, 6 points overall for each of them. You do the math, there's just not enough fights that somebody that wins both fights isn't going to advance. Not the necessity on the finishes and on the scoring that PFL would like. But it does put us in an interesting spot when you walk away from the featherweight standings. Also in action besides them featherweights were the heavyweights. Calvin Tiller gets a guillotine choke, finishes Jared Roshat. That was a big upset. You have Josh Copeland taking the decision from Sean Jordan. Vladimir Irsev gets the TKO of Daniel Galmore. You had Francimar Barbosa eat a couple strikes from Big Jack Galmore, get the takedown, and quickly advance through the half guard for the rear naked, or for the arm triangle. Excuse me, I don't know why I was trying to say rear naked, but for the arm triangle. The rear naked was in the main event. Lance Palmer just decimates Jamao Trinao, the Japanese fighter. I'm totally mispronouncing his name, but dude had a rough tournament. First time out, we'll give you Andre Harrison. Second time, Lance Palmer. No chance for him to score any points. Palmer gets that third round rear naked choke. You had Felipe Lins also with one of the better finishes. He got hurt from some big punches from Alex Nicholson, and then Nicholson not returning his hands to a good defensive position. Gets caught with 1-2, knocked down, just covering up, eats a couple hammer fists. The ref jumps in. Nicholson not happy about it, pretty irate, but honestly needs to breathe because he did get the knockout victory in the second round of his first fight. And there's a clear 8 guys that have scored in the heavyweight division with Copeland, Roshat, Irsev, Nicholson, May, Lins, Tiller, and Barbosa, who have made it. Now, interesting enough, you got to look at this. The heavyweight division, not great across the board. This tournament, again, with names like Nicholson, Lins, Barbosa, not true heavyweights. Guys that are in the past been at 185 should most likely be at 205. But scoring and making the victories happen. Those guys are all guys that are moving on. Well, your traditional heavyweights like Sean Jordan, Kyle Alganar, Daniel Galmar all got shut out in the point scoring. Moving on automatically, those 8. Can't wait to see the official seedings. You got Copeland and Rocha both tied at 3. May and Nicholson and Yusuf both tied at 5. So who gets the higher seeding? Same thing for the featherweights. Couple guys tied. Almeida got the first round finish. 1 out of 2 wins. You got Harrison, who got both of his wins by decision. Same thing with Valiev, that are at 6 points. Who gets put where in the seeding? That is for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So it's kind of who gets the 3rd and which 2 guys have to face each other out of Harrison, Almeida, Valiev. I feel that at some point, Valiev, the fact that he is naturally a 135er, is going to play. And I'd like to see that Valiev, Almeida, and putting Harrison up at the, I guess would that be the 3 seed, would be more of what I would expect, especially because he was a main eventer. Lance Palmer definitely in the 2 slot, and the number 1 is going to be Steven Seiler getting that 12. It's interesting because styles make fights. Now, there are a bunch of guys eliminated, but because they're all been eliminated with no points, there's still going to be one more 45 fight because somebody has to be able to square off with Steven Seiler, as only 7 guys have currently scored. So right now, still looking for Seiler to be able to fight, because Malagari should be fighting Lance Palmer, and then you would have Harrison versus Max Koga, still needing somebody to score. And if it's a first round finish, they would actually jump in there and it'd be Malagari versus Seiler. So that one more fight is very pivotal to the scoring system that we need 8 featherweights to have scored. Styles make fights. And my point is that as we're moving on for the heavyweights, the prospect of Francimar Barbosa either having to fight Jared Rocha or Josh Copeland, I kind of tend to favor the lower-seeded fighter in that one. I'm underestimating the Brazilian. I don't know if he's going to be able to get done on the ground or get the fight to the ground in the nature he wants against one of these bigger heavyweights who has a wrestling background, who has a very effective clinch game. So the tournament play can make it very interesting. Or you're going to be the rise of the 8 seed. Styles make fights, and it's a long way from over in the PFL. But again, I thought it was a very entertaining night of fights. You did have overall, I believe, more than half the card, and in stoppage, Seiler, Almeida, hopefully they get to scrap again, I guess, down the line. I don't know if it's going to happen with the tournament format, but that one leaves a wow from Dan Miragliotta. Everybody has a bad day at work. Bad day for Dan Miragliotta. Lance Palmer put an exclamation point on that rear naked choke in the 3rd round. 3 rounds of grinding. Felipe Lins eating a big shot and coming back with the victory. That was huge. We had Glory Kickboxing. Cedric Doumbé, the former welterweight champion, wants to put a statement and a exclamation point on the fact that he should once again be challenging for the welterweight title, and a blistering 2nd round TKO, just a non-stop annihilation and pressure-filled performance. Great combinations, uppercuts, hooks, and the knees up the middle, a great stoppage. On the main card, you also had the heavyweights, Junior Tafa, Australian combat sports on the rise for real. Junior Tafa, big power, 3 knockdowns in the 1st round. Anthony McDonald did not want anything to do with the power. You had the glancing left hand the first time, a right the second time, and a right to the body, I think, getting it done in the third time. A violent performance. Pachampan Marum Kitakumbo controls the outside. Even though he's deducted a pair of points for low blows, he still was able to work his game from the outside against American Kevin Van Nostrand en route to taking a split decision victory, claiming the interim featherweight champion. So it'll be a rematch with Roman Van Roosmalen for the tie. In the main event, the big power of Alex Pereira would show through as a right hand over the top would take out Yusuf Bulgari. The lawyer in Bulgari, he tried to sit up, he tried to get up, got on his knees, equilibrium still not there, falls over, and the Brazilian retains the title, ends the trilogy. Glory, that was in New York at the Hulu Theater in Madison Square Garden. That was a great night of kickboxing. That was on Friday. And also Friday night out in California, you had Legacy Fighting Alliance 45, Eric Silva, Nick Barnes in the main event. Get through some of the other main card action. Kalal Hill is a top middleweight prospect to keep an eye on. Tripled up on the left head kicks and gets a beautiful knockout. Finish up at Cage Minds _MMA on Instagram. You can see some of the glory highlights there too. That Junior Tafa and Alexander Fiera knockouts. Not to mention Power Wrestling had a great night. I'm talking about Taylor Johnson, Blake Troop, both getting first round TKOs, powering their opponents to the ground, and then unleashing violently. Got to interview him during fight week. Vince Cachero shows off what precision violence was in the first round, piecing up Carlos Puente Jr. when he had him against the cage, strategically picking his punches and pressuring the fellow Californian. Well, the Californian as Cachero, now a Californian, the Hawaiian. But Cachero in the second round switches it up. Thought he had the rear naked choke the first time. Fuente able to get out of it. Switches up. And eventually Cachero finds it. Gets the second round stoppage. Another top bantamweight right there from the LFA. Moises Matera. Vicious leg kicks. Referee Frank Trigg stops the fight after the second round. Casey Ryan. Tough, but didn't have a leg. Couldn't stand anymore. Ryan Lilly pulls off the upset, hands Jordan Amanowinski his first loss. Counter right, follow to ground, ground and pound. A big victory on day's notice for Lilly. And in the main event, Eric Silva finds a way to get back into the win column. Finds a way, walked into an elbow from Barnes, was put on his butt. Barnes follows the black belt to the ground. And Silva finds enough cognizance to be able to lock up the armbar. Gets fully extended. Barnes trying to shake off, but the verbal tap. Silva right back in that LFA welterweight mix. Going to talk about the LFA welterweight title fight coming up this week in just a moment. Nakashima Stewart, that's going to be a good one. But we'll talk about that here in a moment. That was LFA out in California on Friday. Saturday, there was some Invicta action. A couple things to highlight on that card. Alicia Zapatella looks like a top prospect at atomweight, mixing up her strikes. Excellent wrestling. You also had Elisa Anderson looking great. Stephanie Gelmacher, a 135, well actually a 125, she said prospect, looked great there at 135, and that's what she was billed as. When the interview said she's a 125er, the depth that's going to be at flyweight. Flyweight really could become the best women's division in just with WMMA, I believe. There's so much talent, as we're now seeing that division get the opportunity. A lot of the 35ers, like I said, moving down, some 15ers moving up. It really is an excellent division, and more young talent on the way, not to mention Brogan, Walker, Sanchez picking up a big decision victory. 145, it's about time we have a prospect. Felicia Spencer, good wrestling. We knew about the ground game. She gets the rear naked choke, but demonstrated some great kicks and movement in the striking realm. An essence to her game that she hadn't exposed yet. And in the main event, questionable decision is just the only way to put it. I thought the scores were correct. I just thought the names somehow got switched because Jin Frey was plastered against the cage, unable to get much off by Mina Gisander for at least 3 of the 4 rounds. I could have seen the first round going to Frey, quite possibly, possibly the first round. Definitely the third round was Frey's best round of the fight. I thought other than that, she was plastered against the cage, was pushed backwards. The Finn fighter definitely has a gripe, and I think a justifiable one, with the judging, but it's going to be to no avail. Jin Frey, congratulations to her, picking up the Invicta FC Atomweight title. Wouldn't be surprised if a rematch is on the horizon. Definitely some interesting judging in that one. Then we also have this weekend some UFC action. The UFC was overseas in Germany, and this card featured just a lot of decisions. Oh, it pops into my head, so I'm going to go with it. Pace of events is very important to me. It feels like the PFL started out with a great pace. First couple weeks, I mean, bing, bang, boom, fight, fight, fight. They've kind of grinded it down, elongated out the events now. Not as great as it first was. Glory does what they do with ESPN, UFC Fight Pass. It's a weird mix. It's not exactly one fight every 30 minutes. The event doesn't feel too long, at least with your 3-minute round fights. LFA with Access TV, we saw 7 fights in 2.5 hours. But we had all stoppages. All stoppages. We had the longest fight was the Moises Moreta versus Casey Ryan fight, which got stopped after the second round. No fight went longer than 10 minutes. Telling you that now. That was a excellently run card, but basically because we had so many stoppages. Invicta, you had an 8-fight card. We did get a first round stoppage, 2 second round stoppages, but it really almost did go that UFC pace of nearly 30 minutes per fight. It went under 4 hours, even with the main event going all 5 rounds, almost making it that every 3-round fight went 30-minute segment, that you block that out. It's just the pacing of some of these shows, I feel it's just horrendous. You gotta somehow cut down the storytelling time. When you're watching the Invicta card, it just kind of feels long. They do move things along. You do hear a little bit about each fighter. But there's this thing with Bellator where they do grease the fighters up, it feels like, and have them almost staged in the back. And you just walk the ramp with your song and you get right in the cage. And I think that's a big plus for TV. You don't need to be doing the checking them in, the taking off the sweaters, the looking around. Those extra couple minutes, Bellator, I think they've managed those a little bit better, and that's helping in the pace of a show, even if I criticize their pacing sometimes too. But the UFC just grinds us forever, as I'm getting to think about the Germany card that we'll talk about, that for me here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the Mountain Time Zone, card started at 8:30 in the morning for the first prelim, and then we're going 7 hours, ending around 3:30. Now, part of that isn't helped by the fact that almost every fight on FS1, which is the major eater up of time and pacing of these shows, all but the main event, thank you, Anthony Smith, we'll get to him, but we all know it by now, the amazing knockout, the first round finish of Shogun Rua. Every other fight that was on FS1 just exhausted us down. It's not like they wouldn't have exhausted us anyway for some reason, but this has got to end. 7+ hours for a 13 fight card. I mean, at some point, let's pick up the pace. Great stuff early on where you had Darko Stojic taking down and grounding, pounding up Jeremy Kimball. Vicious stuff there. Another needed name added to the light heavyweight division. Manny Bermudez hurt Davy Grant on the feet, goes to the ground, mounts, sets up the mounted triangle, gets put on his back, keeps that triangle choke in until Grant is asleep. The technical submission victory. And then we had the wrestling. Alexander Radic, 2-0 in the octagon, nearly did take out Justin Ledet. The boxer who lost his food and lost his luggage on the way over to Germany just got pummeled, had no answers for the takedowns and the ground and pound of Radic. Another needed name, young contender there at 205 pounds. Radic, Namari, Bartov Fabinski started the run of grinding out your opponent, using that heavy top game pressure, getting takedowns. Demir Havic, the Bosnian, loved his striking, just tore up Nick Hine. Hine did land, but it wasn't the same damage. It couldn't have been the same significant strikes. The damaging strikes I thought were on the favor of Hadzonch, and the fact that it was so close, I guess, but the split decision, and Demir is looking back at Bruce Buffer. Well, Buffer is reading off the scorecards, and right before he announces the third one, I swear he winks, giving it away, but I thought the judges got it right. Jump up to the main card. Mark DeCasey cannot get it started. Nasseret has pressed some big power strikes, knocking down DeCasey in the second round. DeCasey just crumbling to some of these strikes. Solid wrestling, heavy ground and pound. Another TriStar guy in the octagon. Danny Roberts versus David Zawada. Split decision. I'm not quite sure, though, how the judge that scored the fight for Zawada went 30-27. Not a good first round. Obvious for Roberts. After that, you had a possibility of the Darius choke in the third round, but wasn't able to secure. So overall, Roberts, you could tell, was relieved. A hard fought second and third rounds. A lot of scrambling. Calls out Neil Magny. Wants his keys and his ability to get into the top 10. You know, the UFC gives guys opportunities. And with the welterweight division influx, with the rumors of Colby Covington now being stripped of the interim title, of Tyrone Woodley not wanting to fight Darren Till, anything is possible. Danny Roberts with a call out. Neil Magny, one of the more active fighters in the UFC. I wouldn't be surprised if he accepts that challenge immediately just so he has a fight. Marcin Tybura uses his body lock takedowns to stifle Stephen Struve. Big ground and pound. Busted Struve open just above the jaw, below the lip, giving Struve almost a second mouth. Disgusting, violent ground and pound from the Polish en route to a decision. Struve has not looked good in his last two. There was a point where you didn't want Stefan Struve on his back because of how dangerous he was. I remember him being able to reverse and get on top and ground and pound out Stipe Miocic at one time. That Stefan Struve is not as hip fast. He's not as active off his back at this point, and you're seeing Struve take a lot of violence and damage off of his back in these last two fights. Abdul Azatar lands some big shots and is able to out-scramble Vitor Miranda for a unanimous decision victory. I think it was a lot closer than what the judges scored it. I thought Miranda, especially in the first round, took that round, nearly having the head and arm choke. He did what he needed to do to definitely get some takedowns in the second round also. So I thought we could have had a split decision. It was a little surprising how definitive the judges were about that one. But Azantar, a nice debut there in the octagon. Corey Anderson, styles make fights, a high volume wrestler, a younger guy with a high motor against the Glover Teixeira who really wants to load up at this stage, who's active in bursts, who isn't the killer Glover Teixeira that we saw in his first couple of trips into the octagon. People have caught on to his lack of body work. Glover Teixeira gets outworked. The multiple jabs, the changing of levels, eats uppercuts, almost ate rights from every angle, and then just the continue high volume, high activity of Corey Anderson, that Frankie Edgar protege, enacting his mentor style perfectly, taking out the number 3 ranked light heavyweight. Let me say that again. Taking out the number 3 ranked light heavyweight. Anderson was number 9. That is a huge victory, especially in this time of what is going on at 205 pounds. We thought there was a possibility because the champ said it, the champ. Let me give respect to the champ. Daniel Cormier had said it. He might consider fighting Shogun Rua. Brock Lesnar, yeah, that's down the line. That could possibly wait. But as soon as his hands healed, DC had already mentioned he'd like to defend that light heavyweight title again and had pointed everybody right at Shogun Rua, right at the former UFC, former Pride champion, who was on a win streak heading in to the main event of UFC Fight Night Germany. I was not steadfast about this, but I thought that there was a great chance that we'd have a youth inflection and movement here in the light heavyweight division. We've seen the benefits from a lot of guys going up from 55 to 70. Well, what about some dudes that are really killing themselves to make 85? What about going up to 205? People start saying, oh, that's too much size. We don't have this incredibly deep, incredibly crazy light heavyweight division. Sam Alvey and now Anthony Smith have moved up and are taking advantage of this. Not cutting as much weight. Alvey, his power is translated pretty well. And Smith has translated spectacularly. Shogun moves forward early, looking to land big strikes. You got Smith using his outside weapons, going low on the leg kick, trying to work his jab. Shogun would move forward consistently, eat that teep kick to his jaw that was straight up the middle. Boom! That was a heavy damaging blow. Still moving forward. Right hand comes over the top after the jab, and that was a damaging blow to the side of Shogun's head. Shogun is now moving backwards, where Smith really gets to open up, flurries with his combinations. A pair of right hands are able to sneak over the top, hitting Shogun on the back of the ear. Shogun floats back to the cage, and that's when this elbow lands, busting Shogun open. He's out on his feet. Right, left, 1, 2, boom, boom. Shogun goes down. You can't blame the ref in that situation. Mark Goddard was literally trying to lunge in after that elbow ended, but Smith was so quick with the 1-2. Credit to Mark Goddard for catching Shogun's head and not letting it bounce off the mat. He was slightly, I'm talking about milliseconds behind the finish, But in all, it was a great catch on catching Shogun's head. An even better finish, though. My gosh, that is knockout of the year right now. I may be prisoner of the moment, but the violentness of that elbow, the standing knockout, the follow-up 1-2, he just knocked out the number 8 contender. He just knocked out the guy that Daniel Cormier was focusing on. Anthony Smith has made an impact at 205 pounds. And then his post-fight interview was simply because Volkan Oezdemir has had to pull out of UFC 227. And then Khalil Roundtree offered to fight Alexander Gustafsson. That wasn't happening. Anthony Smith simply said, Gustafsson, I'll see you in LA. Not long after, news breaks that Alexander Gustafsson himself is injured and has withdrawn from UFC 227. Not the biggest DC fan in the world, but then DC basically goes to his notepad, sends it out on Twitter, that Alexander Gustafsson has changed since their fight, that they'll always have that night, that Gustafsson has been chasing DC, obviously, around, who has a broken hand, but is now turning down these young challengers left and right with this sense of entitlement that Gustafsson himself needs to be in a championship caliber fight, that he is worthy of only a big fight. Even turned down Jan Blachowicz. Jan, who just knocked out Gustafsson's teammate, Jimmy Manuwa. I couldn't agree more with Cormier. And Cormier then went on to also tell Gustafsson that the closest that they'll get to seeing each other in the octagon again will be with DC calling a Gustafsson fight, that they're not going to share the octagon again. I actually couldn't agree with DC more. I was excited right after that knockout. It was the first thing I thought was the Gustafsson fight. And exploded in joy even more when Lionheart took the bull by the horns, went to grab the brass ring, and called out the number 1 contender. Things are heating up in the light heavyweight division. Alair Latifi had a great win. OSP keeps doing work. You saw what Corey Anderson just did. Volkan Oezdemir, yes, he did lose to DC, but outside of John Jones, who hasn't? We're getting close to the retirement of Daniel Cormier. We don't know if he'll defend that title again, or the next time that the 205 belt is on the line, could it be the vacant title, and we're starting anew. I truly believe that the plan for John Jones when he returns to action in MMA is to do it at heavyweight. Does that add an asterisk? And what kind of pressure comes with the next guy that becomes the light heavyweight champion? Because even if Alexander Gustafsson grabs it, it'll be a great moment for his country, a great moment for his family, a great moment for him. But there will already be the undertag line that this is the guy that is in actuality the third best guy in the division. And for the UFC, this is the moment already oh so quick. It feels like where it'll bite you in the butt now that you don't have either Phil Davis or Ryan Bader under contract in roster. That right now, Gustafsson, Oezdemir, Teixeira, Latifi, Blachowicz, Manuwa, OSP, Corey Anderson, Dominic Reyes, Tyson Pedro, the couple up-and-comers, Anthony Smith and Sam Alvey, the guys that have jumped up now the weight classes. Are these the names getting you excited, or does it not feel the same as when you had John Jones and Daniel Cormier? So the light heavyweight division becomes very interesting after this weekend with that youth inflection. And don't forget, even though we haven't seen him in a while, you still got Misha Serkinov coming back. You have Gazimar Antagulov, who I'm going to talk about here in action this week in Canada. But by the beginning of 2019, We're talking about a drastically different 205-pound division, and the microscope, I felt, gets put on that division right after these performances that you had this weekend by Anthony Smith and by Corey Anderson, that the youth is coming. And again, Tyson Pedro, Dominic Reyes, two other names to keep an eye on. And Alair Latifi may have his time coming too. Tuesday night, week 6 of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contenders series. Couple mouth-watering fights on that card. LFA heavyweight champion Jeff Hughes, a training partner of Stipe Miocic, there in Ohio at the Strong Style fight team, takes on Josh Aplett, a Bellator vet with a big left hand. Aplett, Hughes, I'm pretty sure that I like Hughes in this one. He has to go for the finish. If he's able to get it, I don't see a reason why a guy who has many finishes on his record, more than an 80% finishing rate, I don't see why the UFC wouldn't pick him up. Light heavyweights, again, I talked about we need more of them. You have Pennsylvania's Chris Bouchier, who's 7-3, taking on the top Australian and New Zealand prospect, Jim Crute, who's 7-0. And not to mention, if you didn't already know, which I'm sure you did, much hyped, notorious Nick Newell, the former XFC champion. Yes, you know who I'm talking about. The guy with the partial left arm, with the incredible submission game, with 11 finishes, 9 by submission, takes on Team Alpha Males 4-0, Alex Munoz. Just offhand saying this, just looking at the couple guys that Munoz beat. Munoz looks like a fine prospect. He's beat some other prospects, other guys at his level. But this is a big jumping competition up to a guy like Nick Newell, who's beat Keon Caldwell, who's beat Ryan Reynolds, Ray Reynolds, who is a really tough veteran. His only loss has come to Justin Gaethje, and he's on a 3-fight win streak. I think that Crute, Newell, and Hughes all have great opportunities to get UFC contracts Tuesday night. No Professional Fighters League this week, but we do have Legacy Fighting Alliance on Friday night. LFA 46. It's going to be a one-of-a-kind event in Newport News, Virginia, at the Fellicker Field hangar. One-of-a-kind atmosphere there on the base. And guns up, Marine Corps Sergeant Kyle Stewart, 10-0, takes on and challenges James Nakashima, a battle of undefeateds. Stewart challenging Nakashima for the welterweight title. This will be Nakashima's first defense since winning the title this past September. Dealt with some injuries. These guys, funny enough, fighting in Virginia, both train in Arizona, 30 minutes away from each other. Nakashima at the MMA Lab. Stewart at Arizona Combat Sports. That gave the opportunity a couple events ago when LFA was in Arizona. Have a nice face-off. Great promo if you want to check that out. No one has been able to keep up with the pace, the pressure of Nakashima. Stewart, much more the finisher. Nakashima has not been able to find that finishing mentality, but has worn down all of his foes outside of a couple low blows and point deductions against Eric Krantz. There's not been a lot of criticism besides the finishing. But Nakashima, a solid prospect. Stewart, creative with his submissions, very good striking, trains with Franku. You know they beat each other up. Iron sharpens iron. This is going to be a wonderful main event Friday night. Co-main event, Alexandre Bezerra, Bellator vet, incredible Brazilian submission artist who has a fearless, unorthodox striking game. takes on Sam Tomer. Tomer, 11-2, very athletic. He's going to want to use his striking and keep this one standing. That's at 145. Matt Karilli, a talented striker from Turkey who I got the chance to see up close at LFA 39, takes on Sean Spaeth, who's 4-1. You have tough vet Deshaun Boatwright, who loves his high kicks, or not tough vet, Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series vet Deshaun Boatwright, jumping right back in the mix, taking on Matthew Summinger. You have a wonderful card Friday night on Access TV. And for our UFC fix this week, the UFC is on Fox. UFC on Fox 30 in Calgary. And you have the rematch up at the top. The main event, number 4 ranked Dustin the Diamond Poirier, number 3 ranked Eddie Alvarez, the former Bellator, former UFC champion. Before he gassed out, it well looked like in the first match that I thought Poirier was on his way to finishing Alvarez. Alvarez dig down deep, was on the comeback. Then you had the hand down. I'm not sure how he didn't miss it. I'm not sure how it wasn't a disqualification. I thought Poirier won the first fight. I thought that there's no way that both of these guys should have had to have fought each Justin Gaethje for us just to get to this point of the rematch. Smart money, my thought would have been an immediate rematch. An immediate rematch should have been the right thing. Alvarez has since taken away the undefeated record of Justin Gaethje. Poirier beat Anthony Pettis, and oh yeah, then also beat Justin Gaethje. We're back here at this point. It almost feels like this is the two other guys in the lightweight division, especially with it being held up. Khabib, we don't know what his health is like, but we know that the UFC is just dreaming and fantasizing of Conor versus Khabib. Does the winner of Alvarez-Poirier just automatically now fight Ferguson? Ferguson himself, who I'm sure still wants to fight Khabib, still wants to fight Conor. We at least now have these 5 guys in the mix, but one comes out presumably on Saturday night. The dog in the fight that Eddie Alvarez has means you can never count him out. That's what we saw in this last matchup. That's what we saw out of him so many times. He's the underground king for a reason. I would almost instinctively want to give the edge in the striking to Alvarez, but we saw Poirier has been able to hurt everybody with his hands. They've become so sharp. I think that his ground game has been underrated, and his wrestling really has improved. As I said the first time, I think that it's stock up for Dustin Poirier. As long as his cardio has improved somewhat, just a little bit, because you got to be those championship round ready in this fight, I think that Poirier comes in the favorite. I'm taking Poirier in a dogfight. I won't be surprised if Alvarez wins. This is an also close, great matchup there for the main event in Calgary. Not to mention, you also have at the top of the card, the co-main event, Jose Aldo. When was the last time we saw him fight 3 rounds? Oh my gosh, Jose Aldo is fighting 3 rounds, and he's fighting against Jeremy Stephens. Another guy that, quite frankly, has just improved so much. The combinations, the power, the leg kicks. I couldn't be a bigger Jose Aldo fan myself. Aldo has not been the same guy in quite a while. I don't know if the thought of no takedowns from Stephens will allow Aldo to open up to his full potential, or has he lost it? The momentum, the uphill, the nastiness. He used to fight at 155. I feel like he's the bigger guy. This is a big, huge opportunity for Jeremy Stephens, and I feel like he takes opportunity in the bull by the horns. It kind of just feels like, and even I really just don't want to say it, but that Jose Aldo's best days may be in the rearview mirror. 115-pound division, Yanni and Jacek, Tisha Torres. This is a top 10 matchup, a top 5 matchup. Torres has been on a tear. Her mix of volume striking and incorporating the wrestling the way she's done to get takedowns has been great. But she's taking on Yanni and Jacek. How much has the former champ style now changed after having the setbacks that she's had twice against Rose Namajunas? I believe that there's a much better ability for Jędrzejczyk to implement her presser style of striking with her length, with her size against Torres. Torres, best bet is going to be bopping around and trying to get in, out, attack combination, get in, out, attack, takedown. It's going to have to be a frantic kind of pace fight where Jędrzejczyk wants to fight a long fight and put her opponent against a cage like she normally does. The chess match for this one is going to be insane. It'd be hard for me to imagine Jędrzejczyk you losing 3 in a row. I'm leaning towards the former champ in that one. Alexander Hernandez had that huge debut right-hand knockout of Beneil Dariush. He'll get the opportunity to cement himself when he takes on Olivier Aubin-Mercier, the Canadian, in Canada. I feel like we know more about Mercier, so he feels like the smarter pick if you're picking fights right there. His wrestling is top-notch. His ground game has been solid. And his striking has been coming around. Getting the finishes in the last 2, the submissions. Mercier, I take as the favorite coming in against Hernandez. Even though Hernandez has that blistering power, we'll see what he's all about. This is a big possibility for an upset, I'm guessing, for Hernandez. Jordan Meehan, he looked great. He found a fire. He's in Canada. Depending on how his camp went, where his head's at, you can see tremendous striking, great grappling. We know that Alex Morono is going to grind. He's going to walk you down. He's going to stay in your face. It kind of is a battle of who's in the mood that night. I wish I could say more about that welterweight contest. In the featherweight division, Hakeem Dawodu, Austin Arnett, a fight of the night candidate there. Great striking, going to go back and forth. Love how that fight's going to play out. Islam Makhachev versus Cajun Johnson. Johnson has the striking advantage. I feel he's going to have a cardio advantage. I feel that the UFC is throwing young prospects at Johnson, and they're testing these prospects, and they're testing Johnson. And so far, Johnson has seemed to really come into his own. This is a big fight for him against the Russian. Talking about Russians, Gazimov Antagulov and his power wrestling game against the all-power, all-frantic Ion Kuntilaba in the light heavyweight division. And then to wet your whistle at 155, 2 vets of the octagon, John McDessie, technical kickboxing, against the power brawler Ross Pearson. Who can implement their game plan? Can Pearson cut off McDessie, use some leg kicks, or does McDessie use his front kick and then able to pierce up a frustrated Pearson? Alexis Davis meets Caitlin Chookagian in what is a top 10 flyweight women's matchup that should be a lot higher up the card than what it is. Should probably actually be in the feature prelim spot where Morono versus Meehan is. I would have the ladies much further up. Oh, and actually, the ladies are on Fight Pass. I went all the way through the Fox prelims and forgot to mention that McDessie versus Pearson kicks off the Fight Pass portion of the card. Ortiz, Nicolau, 2 talented flyweights that can do it all. Strawweight division, Randa Marcos against the champ's wife, Nina Ansaroff, the wife of Amanda Nunes. As Nunes' game has progressed, so is Ansaroff. You're going to have a striking game here, and look for Marcos to be the one initiating the takedowns. Canada, UFC on Fox 30. That main card is freaking amazing. Again, to remind you, because I just went through all the fights basically, Alvarez-Poirier is the main event. Aldo Stevens is the co-main event. You have Jacek Torres, the Canadian gangster, Olivia Aubin-Mercier, or does young Alex Hernandez, coming off of that knockout of Beneil Dariush, cement and catapult himself in that UFC stardom? You did get the win over Dariush. This takes him to a whole new level, doing it 2 times in a row and showing consistency. That would be huge. So UFC is up in Canada this week. The CageMinds.com local scene. It was a perfect weekend for Fit NHB in Ignacio, Colorado, at King of the Cage Perennial, as Jamie Hinshaw twice knocks down B-Win in the first and in the second round, counter right hands as they got into big exchanges, had the back in both rounds. It was the second round where Hinshaw finds the rear naked choke, defends her title for the first time. And new with an omoplata victory submission, Sherwin Price picks up that junior welterweight King of the Cage title. Congratulations to both the champions. Francisco Dominguez, Austin Lewis, Oliver Parker also pick up victories. 5-0 up in Colorado for Fit NHB. And in Clovis at Force of One Fighting Championships, Path of the Warrior fight to the end. Gene Pettis picked up a first-round TKO victory over Paco Castillo. The fight was stopped after a cut. It was knees on the inside and big strikes landed from Gene Pettis. Pettis is quickly already found out when he'll be in action next, accepting to be the short-notice replacement opponent for Aaron Angel Baby Pettis and Hobbs at the School of Hard Knocks Promotions event August 4th. That makes that event that much more impressive. Derek Pettis will also be on the card. He has had a new change of opponent after Edgar Zubia was pulled from the event. Not fully sure on the details on that, but we'll be getting in touch with Isidro Castillo to get an update on that August 4th lineup. A big step up in competition, I feel, for Angel Baby, taking on a tough, battle-tested Gene Pettis. I don't think anybody has jumped up to facing Gene this quickly. I was starting to think that Gene had ran out of top prospects to challenge himself against out here, but he just found one more. Not to mention, Legacy Boxing Promotions has already announced Aztec Warfare 2 for October 20th at the Hispanic Cultural Center. The main event is going to see Matthew Papitas Escobar, the Cage Minds 2017 boxing knockout of the New Mexico year winner, taking on the returning to action Willie Villanueva. Villanueva, I've seen in the gym. I know he hasn't been active over the last couple years, but when guys like Alex Holguin have needed sparring, Villanueva has been there. Can't wait to see what that main event brings. Aaron Angel Baby Pettis, I said he's going to fight Gene Pettis August 4th. He's already booked for October. Going to be taking on Juan Carlos Guillen. You guys may know him as Johnny Guillen. We've seen him against Jason Sanchez inside of the ring. And saw him at King of the Cage against Tim Sosa before, a veteran of both. Another top-notch test. I'm liking where this is going, from Roy Ball to Pettis versus Pettis to Pettis taking on Guillen. Angel Baby is kicking it up a notch, taking on some tougher challengers. The card also right now consists of Agustin Junior Pettis versus Alberto Tovar, Andre Galarza versus Daniel Flores. To be announced, they're looking for opponents. Jose Luis Sanchez, the Mongoose Ronnie Baca. They're looking for guys to fight. Brandy, Baby Doll Montoya, coming back, the Rosales product, who's been away serving the country, had a baby, got married. She's coming back to the boxing game, planning on fighting here locally, and quite possibly, if anybody's crazy enough to fight Brian Mendoza or Matthew Griego, those names have also been thrown out for this card. So we're kind of going with a Rising Stars theme here October 20th at the Hispanic Cultural Center for Legacy Boxing Promotions. I know that coming up here at the end of the year, there's still some rumors swirling. There could be some Fresquez events in the combat sports world. We're not sure. Could it be boxing? Could it be another Jackson Wink fight night? Not sure. Also, pretty sure we should have news sooner than later on when the next Jackson's MMA series event will be. Keep posted to the local scene. Keep posted to CageMinds.com. This week we got a featured interview up with the magician, John Dodson, talking about Ninja Brand. It's not a company that sponsors him. It's a company that he's part of. One of the 4 owners. There's also talk of a Ninja Brand ninja gym for all sorts of ninja activities to be built here in Albuquerque. So check that interview out. This has been Cage Minds Uncensored. Thanks for listening.